Hey church friends, Chris here. Our 100th episode was on things we wish we knew sooner in our Christian walk. You got to hear what me and Murdoch wish we knew sooner in our Christian walk, but now is a chance for you guys to share with us what's one thing you wish you knew sooner in your Christian walk. So if you'd like to share that with us, you could email us at yourchurchfriends@gmail.com or join our Facebook group page. There you'll see the post that we have talking about this, and you can leave a comment right below. If you give a thumbs up, I'll share it on an upcoming episode, like our friend Paul. He said, understanding the true meaning of Isaiah 55:9. And Isaiah 55:9 reads, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So if you'd like to share with us, again, what you wish you knew sooner in your Christian walk, you could email us at yourchurchfriends@gmail.com.
Lost deep in the pages of your Bible are the books that are unmentioned, unheard of, and unread. They are the Forgotten Books of the Bible.
All right, welcome to Your Church Friends podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Mirda.
So over Christmas, we bought the kids Nintendo Switch, and it's been really fun. The kids have enjoyed it. I really liked buying it for them because it took us kind of went backwards for them with video games. You know, like we had an Xbox, but like Reed was like 4 when he started playing Halo, and I think that's a little too advanced for a 4-year-old. But he was actually really good at it. But
I was gonna say, it explains why he's good.
yeah, he was really good at it. But we bought the Switch, and what I found lately is myself being more drawn to want to play that. Like I grew up playing video games, and I played video games for a very long time. But really around the point where Reed was born was where like my individual, I just play video games by myself time dropped dramatically. And it wasn't that I didn't have the time or Justine didn't let me. It was just more like I would grab the controller, I would turn it on and be like, I don't really care about doing this.
I get that. I kind of have the same thing.
Yeah, so then more of the time playing now is like family stuff. We'll play like Minecraft together and things like that. Or
The Switch is really good for all that family stuff. It's kind of built around that, yeah.
And we'll play like me and Reed will play Halo together. So it was more just based on like playing with him only. But the Switch, I found myself because you know how you could take it and it's just in your hands. And so I was sitting on the couch and we bought that online thing.
Yeah, the online pack that comes with like the older games and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
And so yesterday I'm just sitting there for I don't know how long, but I'm playing Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
Yeah, that's a classic.
And I was just all into that. So that's just kind of, I guess I want more of a confession to start the show.
Confession. I've rekindled my childhood love of video games.
Yeah, there might be an issue of video game addiction coming back into my life.
Yeah. Growing up, when I was younger, we had the original Nintendo. I don't recall having a Super Nintendo, but we did have the Genesis. So like that was when I was a kid, and then really like that was more of like my brother was playing on more on those. I was kind of on the Genesis, but then when we got the PlayStation 1, that was like mine. So I was a PlayStation kid through PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. My cousins had like the N64 and stuff. So having the Switch and having some of those older games or being able to do stuff, it's fun because like I remember just really loving Mario parties and all those. I really liked the original Pokemon Snap. So they just I think they threw that on like the online thing too. So it's been fun. We had the same thing. Casey got a Switch, and just playing some of the older Nintendo stuff is fun.
Yeah, it really is. It's like I think we talked about it yesterday, right? You're like that TikTok guy. Is like if you found yourself not enjoying video games, it's not you, it's the video games.
Yeah, and for me, it really hit home because I haven't had a modern console since the PS2. Like there was a PS2 and then nothing, and then the Switch. But mobile gaming for me, and mobile gaming has all the like log in for this or get this and all the achievements and all the stuff that it tracks. And it's just like, are you playing the video game to play the video game and get the enjoyment, or like are you doing it for all of those other reasons? So yeah, the guy on TikTok was like, go play a game that was put out before internet connectivity and just play the game for the enjoyment of playing the game. It's like, yeah, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, it really is. It took me right back to childhood. But that's not what this podcast is about.
I do want to ask, we don't need to get into it, but you said that you had another thing that you were going to say to lead it off. I just want to know what it is.
Oh, it was talking about the recordings I had to do by myself.
Okay, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, those are difficult. I don't want to talk about it.
I'm here now. I don't want to talk about what we already talked about. Never mind.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it at all. But this is, for all accounts of being forgotten books in the Bible, the last one.
The last of the canonical forgotten books.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So this will be the last one. Then we'll jump into the Didache, Shepherd of Hermes, and tackle the mountain called Enoch.
What's crazy is to think that, like, so we're doing the forgotten books, and anybody listening through this series, if we forgot one of the forgotten books, no one would know because it's that forgotten. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're not getting
People are like, yeah, I didn't really know any of those. Like,
Yeah.
well, you don't know what else we're missing unless you open up to that first page of the Bible and follow along the index, right?
Yeah, I don't remember which one it was, but it may have been Zephaniah. And I was like, yeah, we're going to cover Zephaniah. I was talking to Justine.
Yeah,
she
I
was
think
like, Zechariah? And I was like, no, Zephaniah. She's like, that's not in there. You're making things up now. I'm like, no, it is.
your pages just got stuck together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Is that even an excuse anymore? It's all digital.
well, if you still read the pages. Like, I still have the Bible book that I read.
You just have it for show.
There's lines in there, markings.
I remember that was a thing. One time I was preaching and I was just using my phone
Mm-hmm.
to like reference everything, and basically got some feedback. Joe was like, "Yeah, we get it's the same thing, but maybe just have a print Bible up on the podium anyways." It's like, to me, is like, I don't get it. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like that's more of a lie because I read either on my phone or on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, let me go bust out the big print one and bring that, which anytime I've been on that stage since, I've used the print one just to, you don't need to cause little stumbling blocks for people.
Appease the people.
But yeah, I remember I was just reading off my phone, and I guess that was a step too far for some people.
That is.
That is.
That's like, you went way too far. Confession number 2, I guess, for this episode. I actually, when I teach, or even for this podcast, like you're seeing my Bible's open, my phone's on top of it, but every scripture reference I have is on my computer in my notes.
That's what I'm saying. You have it
Yeah.
here just for show.
Yeah, it really. But there are moments where, like, if for the purpose of our podcast, it's different. If you say something, I'll look at the print because usually I have things written down that I'm like,
Right. Yeah, you reference that a lot. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, on my margins I have this.
but when I'm teaching, I don't. It's just literally there on whatever stand just for the show of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Confession number 2. It's a very deep, heartfelt, pulling, exposing of myself episode here.
I use technology. The Amish are very disappointed. Good news, they won't know about that confession because you did it on a podcast.
I've been shunned.
Anyways, people really want. Did we already say what the last book
Oh,
is?
no, we got into the foolishness. Titus.
Titus.
Yeah, Titus is a good one. It has so many things just from the content in it itself, not even looking at what the background history surrounding the book it is and who Titus is. So these might be slightly longer episodes that we might have to shave up into maybe a couple of parts here.
I think this one will be.
It might be. I'll get.
I
into
mean,
the-
if you talk a lot, sure.
I'll get into the questions, and that might lead to why. So we're gonna look at what the Pastoral Letters are, what's up with Crete, who was Titus, and then you want to touch on the Trinity?
Sure. Is that why it's going to be long?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about eggs and water and whatever
Waffle
else.
batter.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't heard that one.
No, you haven't?
No.
Oh, I just made it up. That's why.
Like one time I was at Denny's and a pastor told me about the Trinity.
And it opened my eyes.
We'll get to it. We can go in order, but just that question of like, who is Titus? I think that the book, obviously Titus, it's addressed to Titus, and we did cover 2 Timothy, right?
Yeah, that's how he started.
Right. So we're looking at 2 Timothy, and a lot of people are more familiar with like 1 Timothy. They're like, oh yeah, Paul, he's got that young guy
Mm-hmm.
like Timothy, but people forget about Titus. They're just like, yeah, he was also around, kind of doing the same things,
Yeah.
like full on left. Then as we go, like left in Crete, and there's stuff going on there. So full on church leader.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, people like Timothy more. Like Titus is just over there, like page or two away.
It's because
Forgotten.
It's because Titus was full Greek. Timothy was only half Greek.
The look on your face is
not gonna
was that
use-
supposed to be?
Tropical thunder.
Oh, so
But I don't want to use that. Because people might be like, why would you watch a movie like that? But I might just leave this in.
this episode is going to be a struggle. All right. So you said first question up, the Pastoral Letters.
Yeah. So let me get to the breakdown first, and then we'll get into the question. I always have to do my breakdowns.
Okay.
It's systematic in my head. OCD kicks in. So chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 15 is introduction instructions about elders, some truth in various groups. So you see in there's the qualifications for the elders. There's a little talk about what the Cretans are, instructions for older men, instructions for older women, instructions for younger women, and instructions for younger men, instructions for slave, and why we teach. And I honestly found like the instructions to be like really interesting when I read it, like prepping for the show again.
Mm-hmm.
There's just like things that stood out to me that I didn't catch the first time. So like when he's talking to the women, likewise teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live,
And not drink a lot of wine.
not slanderers, addicted to much wine, but teach what is good. And then the word then follows it. Then they will train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husband, so that no one will malign the word of God. And then similarly encourage young men to be self-controlled. But it's like in each one of them, it's like self-controlled, sound doctrine is sprinkled in there. And those words kind of like the connection between like older women teach the younger woman, then this will happen so that God's word won't be looked at like shamefully.
Yeah, you brought up sound doctrine. That's definitely a huge thing throughout it. Self-control gets mentioned quite a bit, but also good works / good deeds is just like all throughout the thing. I know that James tends to get highlighted as the book that's like, oh, talking about your faith, I'm going to tell you about my faith through my good works, right? But I didn't realize that Titus was just so heavy on good works. Like, cool, you're doing this, let it show through your good works. You're doing this, instruct them in good works. You have sound doctrine, let it come out in good works. So just kind of those theme words that we're talking about coming out, definitely sound doctrine or, teaching coming through is a big one. How you just gave those relational type aspects of, hey, in these situations, but kind of what is that supposed to result in? Kind of how you had that then. It's definitely, what does good works look like within the household? What does it look like, out in the world and stuff? So
yeah, it even wraps up that part when after it talks about like teach slaves to be subject to their masters and everything, trying to please them, not talk back to them, and not steal from them, and show that they can be fully trusted, so that in every way they will make the teaching about God, our Savior, attractive. And it's in there talking about like how you act really shapes what people think about God. And I know it's something that's said a lot, and I know it's something that's preached a lot, but the follow through of that aspect, that teaching is like, is that something that we really consider?
When you have so there's teaching, and you want to make sure it's good teaching, right? And kind of what we've done, I feel, in current times, at least in Southern California type churches, I would expand it to American churches and probably to Western churches in general. But we've taken, hey, here's a teaching. And we go, do you believe it? And we don't connect believing it to living it.
Yeah.
Like there's a false disconnect there, that as if you could believe something and not live it. You know what I mean? So I think that that's kind of where this book comes in. It's like, hey, we're teaching this, and it results in a living. Versus a lot today, we go like, we're teaching this, does it result in a believing? And I think that maybe we should be changing our ideas from believing into living.
Yeah.
But probably that's more for next episode.
Yeah, definitely is. Then there's the instructions for Christian living. So that's kind of what we tackled right now. So that's 1 through 11. It's what to do, what God has done, what to avoid, and then again, continue to teach. And then the last part is the closing instructions and some final greeting, and that's 12 through 15. So that is the breakdown. I added some things in there to like kind of expand what really is happening in there just from the very generic titles given, but that's how it breaks down.
I'm going to rephrase some of those just as, an outline to it. So you've got the letter opening, which is chapter 1 through 4. Chapter 1, 5 through 16 is Titus's role to appoint leaders and refute error. You've got chapter 2, verses 1 through 15 is the church as a teaching community. Then you go into chapter 3, 1 through 11 is seeking the social good and resisting error. And then, as you were saying, wrapping it up, 3, 12 through 15 is final instructions and letter closing. So kind of saying the same things, but sometimes different wording. You can look at the
Yeah, I like that too.
perspective.
That was way better.
Oh, it's coming from NT Wright. I mean, come on.
Oh,
That was from
NT Wright.
I got this cool book that also has like a video series on Logos, and it's the New Testament in its world. And it goes through and gives so much of the cultural aspect of it. Breaks it down. Here's the Gospels, here's Paul's writings, here's Peter's writings, here's John's, here's just the general everything that surrounds it all. And it gives a lot of the cultural aspect, the videos. It's NT Wright and another guy, I forget his name, but they'll go on location for some different things, and it's pretty cool. Again, when you ask me, hey, what book did you read? I'm like, I don't read books all the way through. It's the same thing of, oh, I'm going to look at Titus, so let me go look at it. But everything that I've seen in there is really legit. Highly recommended.
That's really good.
You have access to my stuff, so
Yeah,
you can go check it out later.
All right, question 1. What are the pastoral letters?
So the pastoral letters, as they've been dubbed, written by Paul, and kind of what I came across, and I tend to like it a bit better, is rather than looking at them as pastoral letters, looking at them as mentoring letters.
Yeah, I like that.
And I like that phrasing to it.
Yeah.
Because I think that people have an idea in their mind of like, oh, pastoral and what a pastor. But like really what you have here is Paul writing to these guys. And it is more on a level of like mentoring. Like, some leadership mentoring, but just mentoring them in the role. Yes, in the role of pastorship and pastoring. But I think that when you look at them as mentoring, it opens up probably people's willingness to jump into them and find applicability. And yes, not everyone's a pastor, not everyone's a leader, but I think it just opens it up a little bit more.
Yeah, so we're looking at 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Those 3 together. Yeah. I read that they didn't really actually begin to be called the pastoral letters till around the 18th century.
Oh, that late?
Yeah,
Okay.
which was really surprising to me. But they were, as early as the 2nd century, they were recognized as a group within the larger works of Paul. So they were already recognized as something separate. And like you said, pastoral letters just because Titus and Timothy's role of being pastors. So that's where you get kind of the name of it.
See, you're stumbling into the trap. You're saying Paul's letters. Have you not learned by now that everything is up for debate?
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to sit here and tell me that Paul wrote these?
So the traditional view...
I'm going to say that Paul wrote them.
The traditional view is that Paul wrote 3 letters, likely with the help of a scribe or a secretary, around 62 to 68 AD. And he wrote them during his 2nd imprisonment, which is unknown to the works in Acts. So it's not anything mentioned in Acts, his 2nd imprisonment. 1 Clement, 5 through 7 says, through envy, I'm getting to your question of Paul.
Oh, no, I'm tracking with you.
I'm working there. Says, through envy, Paul too showed by example the prize that is given to patience. 7 times he was cast into chains. He was banished. He was stoned. Having become a herald both in the east and in the west, he obtained the noble renown due his faith, and having preached righteousness to the whole world, and having come to the extremity of the west, and having borne witness before rulers, he departed at length out of the world and went to the holy place, having become the greatest example of patience. So here Clement is talking about the trip to Spain. When they're talking about the far west, that's Paul's trip to Spain. That's not really mentioned in any of the biblical letters, but it is history thought of that Paul eventually I think in one of the letters he says, I want to get to Spain.
Right.
But they eventually say that they get. So the problems with Paul writing these letters. So here's some views of the traditional view, the problem of the traditional view, that the letters exhibit differences in vocabulary and style compared to the other letters by Paul. The events described in the other people and locations assumed do not readily fit with what is known of Paul and his co-workers in Acts and in his other letters. The false teaching described in the letters seems to reflect the teaching from the 2nd century rather than the time of the apostles. and the leadership structure of the Christian community portrayed in these letters appears to be more like that associated with the early 2nd century than the mid 1st century.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the people who have problems with it. Anthony Kenny says he concluded after reading Titus, it is only Titus which is shown as deserving the suspicion cast on the pastoral. So to him, out of the
1st and 2nd Timothy were right, but
yeah,
Titus,
he was like, Titus, I don't get.
that's why it's more forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Paul didn't even write this thing. Why is it in here?
So that's the problems, or the way people come across some of the views of Paul.
And as we've said every time, it's like, I think that it's good that we are able to study on that level. I mean, the fact of even just the computers that we're running things through, and they're looking at all of the different, for New Testament, the Greek lemmas that are in there, right? And they're able to say there are, I forget what the numbers were for Titus. It was like 130 something, maybe like unique lemmas that were only in this book that weren't found in other ones. So like, that's a crazy level of analysis. And I get that when you're looking at data in a certain way, it can definitely reveal stuff. And I'm not a scholar on that level. And I don't want to just be the guy's like, well, this is what was told to me and this is what we've all done, so don't change it, you know? Even though a lot of times that's kind of where I do side with a lot of church history a lot of times. But I do appreciate that we're looking at things and trying to get like a deeper perspective on it. Some of the things that I look at, though, when they're just like, he uses a different vocabulary, it's like, I could use a different vocabulary right now that's different to this show, but that's not different to my life. You know what I mean? Whether like me and my daughter have a different language, that there would be different English lemmas all throughout. Like, everything's going at our house. We have so many, like, we have a curry language that is just built off of like our own internal memes of words and mistakes and stuff. So we just talk in a different way. And I talk different with you, and and it's not that I'm a different person, but the communication is like that. So sometimes when I look at, oh, he spoke different and he uses different words, like, honestly, if you put me in a more academic situation, I am going to try harder to use my big boy words that I've learned.
I've noticed with every day-to-day talking, it's a lot different than even on the show.
Yeah.
Like, just the flow, the consistency, the dumber sounding. But then when we come to record, there's a difference to that. There's also a difference to...
Oh, we're dumber sounding the rest of the time.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying
no,
we're
I'm
not
smarter
too good
here.
on...
Hopefully, I think I'm smarter here. But then when we come to record, there's this conversation where I'm not looking at my notes. So my notes would be the written things that I have written down that I want to say. And I'm just having this conversation. These are free-flowing words. And then there's the written things. And when I write things, I do tend that I write smarter.
I write 10 to 15 times smarter.
Yeah, like I'm going to use bigger words that aren't usually just things said in my vocabulary. So yeah, I get what you're saying, that to question it based on that is kind of...
And the other thing, it was a known practice to use, how you said, scribe. And if you're using a different scribe who has a different style, or like, you know, whatever it is, and they're just like, that's just how authors are, right? They're different kinds. If you hire somebody to do copywriting, they're going to have different styles and stuff. So if you're getting a person that has a different style, and this is when he's in his second imprisonment or whatever's happening, and this is who's available, who has this different flavor to it, like, that's also kind of expected to me. You know, Paul could sit there and be like, no, you need to use these words and these words, but the influence of someone else helping you write can change things. And again, maybe scholars have answers for all of those things, and I'm looking at it too simplistically, but that's where some of these things, like, oh, okay, cool, let's take it into consideration. But
there's even so Ellingard, he suggested that to obtain the accurate estimate for the relevant frequency of any given word, there would need to be a text sample 10 times bigger than the inversion of the word frequency, relative frequency. So you'd need 10 times that one word. So if a word occurs in Romans, which has 7,111 words, an amount of work from that author of Romans would need to be 71,100 or something like that, words needed.
Right, to be able to
10
see
times the amount. Yeah.
Okay, so cool. Scholars have looked at it.
Yeah. And
I'm
in the-
confirmed. I'm as smart as them without knowing.
So with the 13 letters attributed to Paul, there's only 32,000 words in it.
Right.
So it's not a big enough sample to even prove that, because of frequency, this and that it's not him. And then we even talked about different audience. So if we're going to a different audience, we talk differently, as like in the podcast, different audience to how I even preach on a Sunday morning.
Now, some of the stuff, because talking on the language level, on the level of including things that were more common in the 2nd century, but that stuff piques my attention because in 2012, we were all worried about like the whole Aztec or Mayan calendar stuff ending the world, right? Imagine there was a writing then that was talking about a pandemic and everyone wearing masks and doing all this. Like it would be out of place because no one was envisioning or talking. That just wasn't part of what anybody was looking at, except for those with really shiny hats. They might have been writing something about it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for Paul to be writing about stuff that hadn't happened, that he couldn't have known about, that were cultural things that were happening. This was written mid-60s, and they're talking about this was like early 2nd century. That's like maybe 50 years later. I just gave a thing of a decade later. 50 years later, that's like in the 80s talking about the COVID pandemic, right? And it's just, that piques my attention more, but I didn't, my resources, I wasn't able to go deep enough into, well, what were all of those cultural things and how much of a reference was it? You know, because sometimes, that kind of reference that is like, that wasn't a strong reference.
Yeah.
So for me, that left it on, okay, it's interesting. I would need to do personal, deeper study on it. But again, I trust that it should be in the Bible. I trust that it has good teaching. I didn't feel the need to do that right now.
Ow.
You're right.
I had like a little skin thing.
Hey.
And when I put my hand underneath, it caught on the fabric of the chair and just pulled back. Oh, I'll be okay. I'll tough through this episode. I don't think I need a doctor. I should have put a Band-Aid on. I was going to this morning. All right. So even with that, several of the church fathers, including Ignatius, Polycarp, Clement, they knew of the pastoral letters. So Clement, in his earliest evidence, knowing it, he wrote about it, and there's similarities between 1 Clement 2:7 and Titus 1:16 and 3:1. So I'll read both of them. It says, from Clement, you do not relent on any well-doing. Be ready to every good work and be adorned with every virtuous and holy habit of life. You did all things in his fear. The commands and ordinances of the Lord were written on the breath of your heart. And then Titus 1 is they claim to know God, but their actions, by their actions, they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for doing any good. And then 3:1 is remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient and ready to do whatever is good. So from what I read, they're saying that the similarities are the idea of doing good. So basically, there was enough time for the end of the 2nd century to structure the church basically the way like Paul had wrote it.
Right. It being the seeds of the thing. And sometimes we can think that it's traveling in a different direction.
Yeah.
And when you brought up some of the fathers as well, is that when you look at them who were in the late 1st century and then into the 2nd century, they would have known if it was something written in their time.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're referencing it as Paul, again, that's where I trust a lot of the church tradition on stuff. Because like if it hadn't really been around and then it just popped up, they were able to catch that a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So
yeah, that's where I kind of generally go into with a lot of this. Like I could see the questioning, and the reason why I wanted to bring a lot of this up was because there is such a movement today, I think, that's stronger in questioning who wrote the letters.
But again,
and I
it's
know
fine.
It's been there, and I know it's like, yeah, it's fine if you're doing it for the right purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of times the purpose isn't to do it to like understand deeper, but to then say like that doesn't need to be there.
And say, look, Paul used words that he couldn't have used, therefore we all came from monkeys. It's like,
yes.
What?
Yeah.
Like, where are you?
Yeah. So the last thing I have on this one is that there's the idea that Luke wrote all three of the letters, but wrote them during Paul's lifetime. and at Paul's request, and then as Paul dictated it, one commentator said, the voice is the voice of Paul, but the hand is the hand of Luke. So
Did you bring that up during 2 Timothy as well? That quote sounds kind of familiar.
I may have, or Chris Brown.
Okay.
He's smart.
Yeah, kind of for me, just looking at pastoral letters, because I think the question was like, what are they? It's like they're definitely there to demand. This is coming from that same N.T. Wright book. It says, first, they demand that we guard the gospel and the tradition which embodies it. Second, the pastorals are not woodenly doctrinaire or dogmatic. They abound with an emphasis on doing good deeds and living a life of faith. And third, the pastorals are a robust reminder about the importance of mentoring. So, guarding the gospel, it's not really about putting in a bunch of dogmatic stuff, but living a good life of faith and the importance of mentoring. Those three kind of encapsulate the three pastoral letters.
Yeah, which I think is a good way to sum up all three of them together. We're at around...
It wasn't supposed to be that long. You let me talk and talk.
Well, you had a lot of good stuff.
Rein it in.
Yeah, we had a lot of good stuff there. So I feel bad because it's the episode about Titus, and we barely touched about Titus, who he is. But we'll tackle who's Titus and then touch on the Trinity.
And hopefully this episode doesn't turn into a Trinity.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. No. Well, it will, because we do have the part 3 follow-up.
There you go.
Yeah. So
God's
with
plan.
Jude, we had like 7 questions that turned into 5 episodes. Titus, we have 4 that turned into... There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I am Chris.
I'm Yurda.
We are your church friends. Thanks for listening.
Habakkuk, Nahum, Obadiah, Jude, Philemon, Haggai, Amos,